What is happening out there, Roto Scouts basketball fans? Good to see you, gang. Welcome to a Friday show. Cujo's in the chat. As he says, made it to another one. Getting through another week, especially these days, takes a lot. I get it. Congrats, everybody. You're at the end of your week. If you're still working on something at 4:18 on a Friday, I don't know. I feel bad. I think you got to just put it aside, punch out, go get a drink, happy hour. Whatever your deal is, just tell the boss, hey, I've had enough for the week. I'll be back on Monday. I got some DFS to play, got a show to watch. Hopefully things are going well out there. Unscheduled day off yesterday. Apologies for that. Day just kind of got away from me again. I ran out to hit the supermarket down the block there and just ended up being there for longer than I intended to. And just day got away from me. It was better to be on top of things. Wacky slate last night had some decent results. It was one of those ones where everything's aligning, line up in the top 1,000 with minutes to go. Things are looking good. Low total up at the top of the board, and then they just stop scoring points. It's just one of the, like, Jaren Jackson, I think, had like 4 points in the fourth quarter, like fantasy points wise. Like, it was a light end of the night for me in the lineup that I thought was going to kind of break loose a little bit. Decent results, turned a little profit, but nothing crazy. Thought it was going to be a better day, but hopefully everybody out there, I thought we were on top of things projection-wise and all of that. Night before that, we were on top of things with what we talked about on the show. Anthony Taylor, what's going on, buddy? Happy Friday to you too, pal. Happy Friday to the other people trickling in. Not sure how crazily highly attended it'll be. We have some good slates today, though. FanDuel running a $5 50K to first guaranteed overlay. And then DK with, an $8 100K to first, I think? Not bad. Obviously, different tournament sizes. But that FanDuel one with the guaranteed overlay is paying the top 40% of the field. So you get different top ends, but decent tournaments at least. Both slates cutting off the last game, so we've got 6 to talk about on both sites. And kind of a decent day so far. I'm kind of worried. I hate days like this, a little too quiet out there kind of a thing. Really haven't had any changes come down through the day. We've got kind of a straightforward board. We're waiting on some news. A couple key pieces. But it's key pieces around like Toronto. Zion is obviously a decent size piece. There's just kind of weird spots and then a lot that look straightforward. So it feels like a night where a bomb is just going to drop on the slate and something's going to go haywire. Giannis and Dame not playing. Something like that. But we'll see what we get. Right now, it's looking all right out there. Dallas and Detroit to start off the Vegas board. Just a 1-point game there. Dallas favored on the road in Detroit. 228.5 point total. Not a bad spot overall. Dallas might be getting Dante Exum back tonight. He's up to questionable today. He was doubtful the other day. Now he's questionable. He's been out for essentially the entire year. It would just be a little piece for them to add, but right now just kind of mid-teens type projection on him. Don't expect a ton of craziness out of him. But I do think we can get some pieces and parts on the Dallas side of that one. And then I would expect at least the top end from Detroit will be coming through a little bit. Although as I'm glancing at the board here, Cade hit harder on FanDuel than he did on DK. He's the same price across sites. But it looks like we did get a chunk more of them on the FanDuel slate. But just looks very, very good in the raw form as far as top-end scoring today. Clippers at the Hornets. Ugly one here. Clippers favored by 13 in a road game. 208.5 is the low point on the board. Just a really, really ugly game DFS-wise, fantasy-wise. Charlotte still without essentially most of their NBA players as they've been recently. Clippers relatively back to full strength, but I don't know that that's thrusting really anybody onto our board as I'm glancing down the board. Nick Smith on the Charlotte side of that on FanDuel is coming up some, but on DraftKings he's at a 0 at 5,000. Diabate is a big piece, but we're below the field on both sites on him. He's just a straightforward cheap value center with reasonable expectations of upper 20s minutes. He's probably going to be the most important piece coming out of that game. Really don't like much else top of my head. Denver at the Sixers. The Sixers also without most of their NBA level talent. The usual suspects are all out once again for the Sixers. 9.5-point spread there with Denver favored on the road, 233.5. You can see probably on the board up toward the top there, we've got a massive chunk of Aaron Gordon on both sites. Got back to the starting lineup, played 30.5 minutes. I gave him back 30. I think he could go down to 27, 28 if you wanted to. I don't know that I would take him north to like 32, but I don't think 31 would be a crazy unrealistic projection. And at that point, we're just quibbling. It's all about a range. So like 28 to 31 is probably my range today. And he looks terrific. He's only 4,400, 5,300 across sites. We're going to be talking about that in a minute. But definitely getting some value there. Outside of that, Jokic, at worst appealing like he always is. I'm not seeing him immediately on the board here. But he's going to, at worst, have his usual luxury item type appeal. But it does look like we're getting a fair amount of Giannis, so he's probably getting boxed out by those Giannis shares right now. Chicago and Toronto. Toronto favored by 4 in a home game. 232.5 total in that one. Definitely pacey enough, high enough total game between two pretty lousy teams. We'll see what we get as far as the injuries, the ins and the outs. Like I said, Toronto is one of the teams with a few lingering questions right now. The Celtics at the Pellies with Zion questionable. Celtics favored by 11. I can't really imagine that we're going to get to too much. Let's see. We do have a good chunk of Tatum, which is nice on the Boston side. I should have said too much of the New Orleans side going up against Boston, but it doesn't look like, outside of Jalen and Tatum both, it doesn't look like we're getting a ton. So my instinct was right on that one, just not anticipating the two Boston Stars looking quite as good as they do. But they both look pretty strong, and everything else in that game is downboard at best. I'm not even seeing much. Trey Murphy, who would have been top of my head, the best piece from the New Orleans side, 11% on FanDuel, 2% on DraftKings. Not a lot. And then rounding things out, our last game of the night, there's one after this, but our last game of the night, just 2.5-point spread, Milwaukee at San Antonio. Obviously some star power in that one. Again, we are getting a ton of Giannis, which is nice. Looks like we're getting to a little bit of Keldon, which I don't really love. We've got some Dame on the board, which is a good thing. Definitely going to be getting some pieces out of that game. A fair share of Wemby, it looks like, on both sites, actually, alongside all the other star power we're getting to. Kind of interesting. I didn't think there was going to be that much available value on this slate, but let's see. Where's it coming from? That's a big chunk of Paul Reed. Where did that come from? I was not anticipating that. Oh, Stewart out. That's right. Yeah, that makes sense, huh? Interesting. I wasn't thinking it was going to be as Starsy Scrubsy as it looks like it's going to come up. But anyway, Milwaukee favored by just 2.5 against San Antonio, 235-point total, and plenty to work with in that one. As far as the ins, the outs go, probables, Josh Green, Al Horford, DeJounte Murray's available, Giannis, Dame, and Chris Middleton all probable. Questionables, Dante Exum, Nick Batum, Taylor Horton Tucker, Grady Dick, Kelly O, and Emmanuel Quickley, and Jamal Shed, all questionable from Toronto. So that's like the core of semi-important guys who all play minutes, and then quickly, if he comes back, would have an impact. Hauser questionable for the Celtics. Zion and AJ Green both also questionable. And then no knowns on the outs. Luka Doncic, Maxi Kleber, Derek Lively, Dwight Powell, Jaden Ivey, Isaiah Stewart, Chris Dunn, PJ Tucker, LaMelo Ball, Trey Mann, Cody Martin, Brandon Miller, Tijani Salon, Grant and Mark Williams, both for it's again essentially all of the Hornets NBA players. Torrey Craig, Zach LaVine, both out for Chicago. Vlatko Konkar, Andre Drummond, Joel Embiid, Paul George, Caleb Martin, KJ Martin, Jared McCain all continue to be out for Philly. Jordan Hawkins, Brandon Ingram, Herb Jones, Daniel Tice, and Bobby Portis all out. So a big chunk of guys out for New Orleans there as well. As we get started, 15 people in the room. Appreciate all you guys. Good to see you. Hit the like button as we get started. I won't harangue you too much, but rotoscouts.com is the site. You guys probably all regulars right now. But anybody new, check out rotoscouts.com. Everything's under $1 a day for access to all of it. Right now, we're projecting all three major sports that are going on. Baseball right around the corner. Should be pretty solid. Oh, Mama, sorry to hear that, buddy. Mom says, everybody say a prayer for my guy Gordon. We lost his brother, and he definitely needs prayers up. Drew was a hell of a human and an even better friend. Very sorry to hear that, Belle. Everybody send good thoughts into the universe for Mamba and his friends. I'm going to lose it till I win the millies here. Oh, damn. I didn't see the top message there, Mamba. So, RotoFam, my kids go from Eagles championship game on the field to courtside with LeBron and Jokic tonight, and they wonder why I say, hell no, you can't order anything at the game. Not bad, dude. It's a pretty nice balance there, at least. Let me take those top three guys off the board. For whatever reason, those three didn't go through the FanDuel sim, which is weird because everything just exists for FanDuel, so there's no reason they shouldn't have, but they didn't. Nobody's relevant. Ronnie Holland would have been the closest to relevant out of those guys right now. I'm just going to wipe them out, and we'll resort by DK, and we'll get into some positions. It's really warm in here. Just hit me now how warm it is in here. It's a bitch controlling the temperature in this apartment, or this department, whatever you want to call it. Especially with one day it's 50 degrees, the next day it's 19 degrees at night. It's all over the place. This place is a little bit drafty. Not the best heating system. Like my bathroom in this apartment has no heater in it. There's no vent, no nothing. So it gets cold in there. But right now I cranked the heat up, I guess, last night. And now it is warm in this room. Anyway, you guys don't care about that. Or you probably care, but like that's not the focus of what we're here to talk about. Let's get on it. So, AG, again, top of the board. 48% on FanDuel. Monster share, 79% on DraftKings, even more. The price is just wrong. 5,300 on FanDuel, power forward only, too cheap. Power forward and center eligible on DraftKings. 4,400, that's just way too cheap. This is a .92 per minute DraftKings player. He's a .89 FanDuel this year, .94 last year. I talk about Aaron Gordon a lot when he's healthy. He's one of those guys. He's not Sabonis in terms of how he stuffs the stat line, but he's like a light version of that. Underrated facilitator, decent rebounder, decent scorer. Do not mind Mr. Gordon at all here. Top end play. Devin Vassell, not bad. I didn't sort these by positions, but Devin Vassell's coming up a ton on the DraftKings slate. Those are your top two options. And honestly, you're just getting two good prices on two good, those aren't top shelf players necessarily, but those guys are solid members of the middle of the board. Citizens in good standing as far as I'm concerned, as far as like them delivering successful DFS nights as well. There's no real grudges against either of those guys. No reason to talk down about them. So happy to have either one of them. Vassell didn't really come up nearly as much on FanDuel because he's 900 more. He also doesn't have the positional flex, shooting guard only on FanDuel. So we just got him 4% of the time over there. Mix and match piece, perfectly fine to get to, but not looking like nearly the value he's on DK. Same thing's true about Kelly Oubre. 7,300 shooting guard small forward, just 6% of them on FanDuel. 6,300, 1,000 less, even without positional flex. He's in half of all lineups in our top 150 on DK. That's not even aggressively ahead of the field. It's ahead, and we've got a nice big plus position on all these guys, which I like to see. That is essentially a lineup there if you're looking at positions and everything. I don't know what the salary total's out to. 42.6 for 7 guys. It's essentially a lineup at the top of the board. It's a really interesting slate. Just, again, it right now, and I don't want to say straightforward about a DFS slate, but right now it kind of is shaping up that way. And then obviously you just, drop the chips and they fall where they may. But right now we've got a pretty decent angle here. Travis says, my girlfriend doesn't like turning the heat on. Been living like the ghetto. I have $1 million condo in Vancouver. Yeah, for me, I like the cold, especially when I'm sleeping. But it gets a little like aggressively on the other side, like too cold if I just leave it alone. And more to the point, it's like drafty cold, where it's just like you have pockets where it's just uncomfortable, and it's not the kind of cold I would prefer. Mama says Jokic is not telling lies about his height. First time I've seen him in person up close, and he's gigantic. So let me cut this down for some positions here. Very concentrated among the guards. That's a very solid top end there. And then, honestly, looking down the board, some pretty decent options as far as pivots go with Tyrese Maxey not pulling top end exposure. Chris Paul, Malik Beasley's all right. Kevin Porter's all right. But you have Cade Cunningham further down the board there. Jamal Murray. Giddey, if you're stretching even further, not completely terrible down the board. So there's some options outside of pivoting out of some of these shares. But the top of the board looks really, really strong. I mentioned Vassell. Again, on DraftKings, 60%. He's a 0.98 per minute player. Solid 5.62 value score on our looking for 5.5 value metric there for 61 today. That plays up really strongly. That is actually our only guard on DraftKings that's technically above our value score. Which again, so maybe it's just now among guards because we did get that Paul Reed value. I just want to see how the values break down. That's not correct. Why does Dalen Terry have a 25-point projection right now on DraftKings? Well, that's weird. Hold on. Did that go up to the site? I didn't catch it, or is this upload screwy? Huh. That's weird. Why would it be? Where is it? Oh. Strange. The lookup's not in that cell. Okay. That's weird. All right. So that's not accurate to him whatsoever. That is. That makes a whole hell of a lot more sense. Weird shit. You guys always got to remind me when I change something, when I go like, oh, if I put this in here, it'll show that value score. That's what happened there. That was me probably yesterday when I forget who it was for, but I put in 25 whatever, and I never changed it back to the formula. Just make sure all of these are there now. Yeah, we're good. All right, so getting back to what I was saying, we do have that Paul Reed value. That's realistic because he's only 3,000 on DraftKings. He's a 1.17 per minute player. I've only got him at 17 minutes, but with no Stewart there, presumably he's going to play him. So looks like a decent piece of just dead floor min value on DraftKings. Then you've got the Gordon play. You've got Diabate. So yeah, those are your three values, and then maybe a little bit of Patty Williams at 4,200. There's not much value at all among the guards. So it's all just coming from the bigs right now on DK. Oh, wait. So considering that we've got money to spend at this position, you can kind of look at it like that as you consider the Lillards of the world against how does Lillard play out if you're just utilizing like the guard spot, let's say. $9,000 guard Damian Lillard, we got him 46% of the time, a little bit above the field, a 5.45 value score. But you've got comparable options. You've got a $9,700 Tyrese Maxey who comes up shorter from the value mark, but the raw projection is almost exactly the same. The ceiling is the same, if not better, 1.20, 1.24 per minute for those two players. Better matchup overall, I would say, for Dame on his side and a more competitive game projected. So he's got that going for him. But it's not a bad spot as far as pivot. You do need 700 more to get to a lower end per minute producer technically. But Maxey's also playing without essentially everybody that would matter to impact his production if he just wants to go out and score. He also plays 37, 38 minutes a night. So you get a lot of upside out of that as a reasonable pivot. But again, sim-wise, we got him 14% in our top 150 and a fairly significant undercut to the field. But he does exist as a pivot at worst. What I wouldn't do is chase this all the way back up to the field. It would be a few shares here, a few shares there as a pivot point. And then, like Jaylen Brown, for less, 1.15 per minute, you are taking a bit of a haircut there. But the value mark against that 7,800, 5.34 is not that far off the value mark that you're getting for Dame if you're just talking about the pure guard spot. So there's competitive options there. You've got a 10-1 Cade, who's a competitive option. We got him 6%, a lighter undercut to the field, puts the field probably in the 12-15% range. That's one I wouldn't mind if you were around the field or if I was around the field on. I think you can be there and be fine. He's one of the better per minute producers on the board. And again, we've got money to spend at guard. But it's very, very tight. It looks less concentrated on FanDuel, or maybe just in a different order. I feel like there's more double-digit numbers on the FanDuel side here, though. Like Cade, we got 16% level with the field. Lonzo at 24% level with the field. 25% level with the field on Stephon Castle. 38% of Io. 30% of Scotty Barnes all the way down here. Very differently shaped as far as the guard and some forwards. A lot of different positional eligibilities, too, across sites. They're getting very disparate at this point. Up the board for some commonality, though. We do have commonly good play in Dame. 30% on FanDuel. He's above our value threshold on FanDuel. Technically, he's below it on DraftKings, but that point doesn't exist as strongly on the FanDuel slate. You can see we've got 3 guys above the 5.0 value mark, and then 4.99, a 4.95, several 4.9s and 4.8s to deal with there. I feel like we're a little bit further away with only 1 guy above. There are several guys right around, but a little bit further off the mark for guard value on DraftKings than we are on FanDuel. Russ, 27%, remained in the starting lineup with Aaron Gordon coming back the other day. That was a surprise to me, but seems to be the way that they're going. That said, if he doesn't start, then you could conceivably give him a 27, 28-minute projection instead, and he wouldn't look quite as good. Still going to be a good per-minute performer, but I could see the minutes taking a haircut. I could see a little bit of an impact to his facilitation numbers, let's say, to his rebounding numbers. So you could conceive of a little bit of a haircut, but the good news is the 69, 6,500, as long as he's playing 30-plus minutes, is still pretty good for your per-minute production on Russ. 40% of the top 150 on the FanDuel slate, somewhat above the field for 65 on DraftKings rather. On FanDuel, 69 point guard only, 5+ value score, 27% of our lineup, somewhat ahead of the field. Kobe White, Lonzo, Io. There's room for any of these guys. Giddey as well. I don't know how many of those guys, because they're not like massive values like you see sometimes. So I don't know how many of those guys you necessarily want in an abundance of lineups. Like if you ran 150 lineups that came out with the vast majority having 3 Bulls in it, you might want to take a look at moving some of those shares around. Not that we're really worried when guys come up in the same lineup together, but if you got that over and over and over and over again, it might be worth taking a look at. But I think any 2 of those guys, perfectly fine, and I don't care which of them there are. Again, it's not about them actually playing together. Patty Williams on the list too, Mike, but he's a little bit cheaper than these guys. He's more of a value play, and this is also just amongst like the guard, small forward type guys. But yeah, he's coming up quite a bit. Yeah, Nuke. Projections updates all throughout the day. They go up typically in the early mid-afternoon. Like, I don't jump on them at 9 a.m. because I think it's mostly irrelevant at that point. You need to wait till at least like 1:30 to get some news. They go up on the site then, and then I update them through the afternoon up to the start of the show. There's a little gap while I'm doing the shows, and then I'm on them every piece of news every 15 minutes, at worst on the half hour, but it's never just on the half hour. It's constant. So I'm sitting in this chair pretty much through lock from when I start the shows, through lock, through the end of the late year, through the beginning of the latest games that are on any slate. So I'll be sitting here till 10 o'clock doing regular updates for anything that needs changing. So yeah, website updates all throughout the day. And most importantly, as we get to lock and into late swapping territory, that's when it matters most. If there's a little delay between, an update at between 12:30 and 1:30, matters a whole hell of a lot less. It's going to be a different slate by the time you get to lock. Power says, Shed, Grady Dick, quickly, Kelly O might both be back. Can't touch Bruce Brown, sadly. Shed was questionable. I think all those guys were. Yeah, Dick, Olynyk, quickly, and Shed were all questionable for the numbers we're looking at. I just don't know that we're getting much Bruce Brown anyway. Yeah, didn't really come up for me. I gave him 24 minutes. He's 51-46 across sites. He's all right, but I mean, I think he's just a mixer, and it is who he is spot, low-end value option. So I don't think he's going to be like a zero tonight and a completely irrelevant player overall, but I don't think he's looking like an overly solid DFS option. Yeah, if things change around at all, then, obviously if all four of those other guys don't play or all three of those other guys don't play, then there's definitely an uptick. So, yeah, bear in mind situations, obviously. Appreciate that. Where are we? So again, Jalen and Tatum on the Boston side of that Boston against New Orleans game, absolutely looking pretty solid. 112 per minute out of Jalen this year, 115 on DraftKings, getting him 33% of the time, level with the field on DK, 34% of the time, a little above the field on FanDuel. That's in spite of him actually just coming in at a 4.85 value as compared to these fives, the guys a little bit further down. Part of that could be his small forward eligibility, where he's just sliding in that plays better at small forward as a 4.85 value. Most of those other guys look like guards. I think they're all guards, actually. Yeah, everybody that has a better value score that's on the screen right now is a guard. So that I think explains away why he's getting into such a high number at a lower value score. It's different positionally. You probably won't find him as much at shooting guard. But definitely looks like a very good piece going up against a soft enough competitor. Don't mind that spot for him, and don't mind the spot for Tatum. Plenty upside for them on essentially on any given slate. But this one, let's see, they're implied at 120 plus. This one's carrying or at least earlier in the day, 232, and they're monster favorites. What you might run into is the not necessarily blowout type minutes where they're only playing 30, but maybe you don't get like the 35th and the 36th minute that you sometimes do, sometimes don't. But either guy looks very good, and especially on a short slate. Plenty of money to pay for him. Chris Paul, mix and match FanDuel. Same deal on DraftKings, really, at a 5.2 value. Different days, different slates, that might play a little bit better. Kind of just falling by the wayside as an also ran today, 14% below the field. I definitely wouldn't push it back up to the field. If anything, I think it would take a more of a negative position on it. I don't think he's necessarily flawed here. He's fine, 1.03 per minute, playing about 29 minutes a night. Exactly 29, essentially. But does have nights where he dips down to 27. You get a little bit of a lighter day. I think today against Milwaukee, there's every reason to believe that Chris Paul would be out there for a full complement. You maybe get him 30, somewhere in that territory. He's fine, but not a priority. Again, Maxey just for the raw upside, 10% on FanDuel, 14% on DraftKings. We're below the field on both sides, but as far as the high-end producers who will just be able to call their own number, do whatever they want, he's easily on that list. So I would definitely not run away from the 10%. In fact, I would want at least that 10%, and that's a strong position to have against the field. Same story on DraftKings, 14%. I would want at least 14, 15 there and have the strong position against the field. But if you end up a little bit more, I think you're perfectly okay. Taking less than those positions, I think, could be damaging. So I think you want to have at least those positions on Maxey, if not a little bit more. Beasley looking stronger on FanDuel at 52. He's 51, but he doesn't have positional flex. This is probably, again, a product of him getting into some of those small forward spots. I would bet. Because he's looking significantly better than like Kelly Oubre, who's guard forward eligible, who was coming up a lot more on DK. And it's just not, again, most of the guys that are showing better value marks on FanDuel are just guard eligibility. So that small forward is looming large on the FanDuel slate. Even Timmy Hardaway's getting into 12%, probably by virtue of that small forward eligibility. DraftKings were already at the point where we're just getting mix and match type shares, rotational type shares of a lot of these guys. Beasley in 28 minutes could succeed. I don't mind having some on FanDuel. Doesn't look as good for the 51 on DraftKings, like I was saying. We just got him 12% there. Fairly hard undercut to the field, too. I wouldn't mind spending more of those shares, I think, up the board. Beasley, 0.93 per minute, 0.87 per minute on 21.7% usage this year. Last year, that was 0.66 on 14.2% usage. It all depends on the role. Obviously, with no Ivy in recent weeks, this has been the role for him. But I think he's just kind of flat priced for that. It's not a bad price, but it's also not a good price for him in this current role. So if I come up a little bit lighter, if I'm like 15, 18, and a bigger undercut to the field on FanDuel, I think I'm okay with that. KBJ, not really all that appealing at all on FanDuel. Not really all that appealing at all. That was complex. 18 minutes of 4,200, both guard spots, but it doesn't really matter. He is a 1+ per minute fantasy player, but in that few minutes for that price, it just doesn't have an impact. A little bit better at 35 on DraftKings, but nowhere near a priority. We got him in 10% of lineups just as a spot filler. You guys know how I feel about Tim Hardaway, I think, at this point. 0.58 per minute, 0.62 per minute this season across sites. He's just low end. The prices, honestly, aren't low enough for me to really see any great appeal. He's a spot filler, sure. We got him 12% below the field on FanDuel. That's fine. 8% below the field on DraftKings. That's fine. I'd probably rather be at like 5 or 6 on either site. I really don't see a lot for Timmy Hardaway. Cade, on the other hand, again, strong option. 6% below the field on DraftKings for 10-1. You can absolutely take more if you can carry more. 10-1 on FanDuel, we got him at least 16.67% of the time and level with the field. That's definitely a spot, especially given that he's right at our value threshold outside knocking on the door of it. That's one where I would definitely be interested in having a little bit more and trying to build a plus position. If the field's just at 16, 17, give me 20, 25 at least. I think there's a good reason to add a little bit to Cade here. Lonzo, I mentioned in with the Chicago guys. As far as minutes go, he's got the lowest end minutes, but he's a little bit of a value. 4.95 value score on FanDuel for 4,900, point guard only. Does get him into 24% of lineups. 4,700 on DraftKings, not so much. 6% over there. Castle's a weird one. Castle at 54 does come up a decent amount on FanDuel. 25%. He is an okay value score there. He's a 0.84 per minute player. At 52 on DraftKings, same positional eligibility, we really didn't get him. Probably a product of just how much weight there is going through the guard spots, and he's just getting boxed out. 4.92 value score, though, that's also pretty far off the mark. Nothing to really sell on him on FanDuel. I was going to try and make the argument like maybe he could get a little bit sneaky, but if this is level with the field already, then it's not a remotely sneaky play. I do like to keep an eye out for those, though, that are different across DraftKings FanDuel because, as I've talked about before, with the amount that the industry talks about DraftKings, sometimes you can pick off things that go a little bit underrated on FanDuel. We got no shares of Jamal Murray. We got no shares of Peyton Pritchard. If, who do we have for the Celts? Nobody relevant. Yeah, so Pritchard just kind of looking like an is who he is spot. 57 on FanDuel, not really hitting. 51 on DraftKings, he's playable. It does thrust him over 5. We're looking for 5.5 as a value, but he's better than a handful of options in this territory. He's a mixer. If you have some shares of him instead of some shares of $5,100 Chris Middleton, I think there's nothing wrong with that. In place of $4,700 Alonzo and similar guys, $5,100 Malik Beasley is certainly a guy you could rotate with Pritchard. Nothing wrong with mixing up some shares of those guys. That becomes a situation where a point here, a point there, a minute here, a minute there makes all the difference. They're essentially the same. So if you have a lean, if you have a preference, if you've got him projected for 29 minutes instead of 28, you probably would have gotten Peyton Pritchard right there with 12% and Malik Beasley down here with 3%. It's that close. Io's the big price outlier on FanDuel at just 56. That's got him in nearly 40% of lineups. That's level with where the field is in the projections is ran against. I don't mind swapping him out for some of the other Bulls. but I think a pretty decent share is going to be in order here. 0.85 per minute. On DraftKings at 0.86 per minute, 5,700, same positioning. Another guy that we just didn't get, but it's also another one that's not going to sneak up on anybody. That's been projected for ownership on FanDuel pretty much all day. Good players going down the board, Giddey, Trey Murphy. Either guy is at worst a mix and match from the solid mid-range. If you're looking to replace $7,000 guys either further up the board here or at different positions, I think both those guys can easily be kept in mind. Neither guy looks near as appealing on DraftKings as they do on FanDuel. But neither guy's a priority. Grady Dick, Brendan Boston, Kyle Lowry, DeJounte Murray, Scotty Barnes. We do have a lot of Scotty on FanDuel. Just 1% on DraftKings at 9,400. At 97 on FanDuel, we got him a lot. It's another guy going through probably the small forward, maybe at power forward as well. But I think that 4.7 value that he's carrying is playing a little bit differently on the FanDuel slate. Murray's a mix and match guy. There's nothing wrong with a few shares, but like I was saying in the run up to the show, I don't love anything from the New Orleans side of that game just going up against Boston. Like, there's many, many more appealing spots. But Murray's probably their second leading option, if not their first leading option. I was saying Trey Murphy before, just on security of minutes at the top. But Murray playing at 1.23 FanDuel, 1.24 DraftKings this year. There's appeal in that and just the raw numbers. Eric Gordon at 27 minutes for 4,600 in that shortened Philly team. Not really appealing. 0.66 per minute on FanDuel, 0.67 on DraftKings. A few odds and end shares is fine, but that is not a good option. Gary Trent. The Bucks continue to be without Bobby Portis, so guys like Gary Trent could pick up a little bit of upside. We got 29.3 out of him in 27.4 minutes the other day to illustrate the point, but that's around what you're getting. Like, he's going to play, if he plays up, it'll be up to maybe about a point per minute like that, and about 27 minutes. So that still really doesn't exactly vault you up the board. For 43, it's okay. It hits, but it doesn't destroy. But 7% on FanDuel is not bad. Level with the field. He's an option. He's playable. 4,100 on DraftKings. Another guy that we just really didn't get. Some of these guys are just getting squeezed out by those because we've got money to spend at guard and we need the values among the bigs. If you want to take a just completely radically different angle on the DraftKings slate, it does seem fairly straightforward that maybe you take a few lineups and dedicate to plays like having a little bit of Gary Trent in there. Nobody's going to be doing it. And that just changes the shape. Like if you're looking to build in a Giannis and Wemby lineup, I don't know. I'm just speculating. We'll look at the numbers when we get there. Just completely changing the build is at least available because there are decently priced guys here. But you're sacrificing the overall actual scoring value that you're getting at the other positions. But like $3,500 KPJ, 5.09 value score, like that is there. It's not completely unfathomable that it couldn't deliver today. $3,900 Timmy Hardaway again. I don't like the player. I don't like the spot. But the numbers are there to support it that in a handful of runs of this slate, it'll work out. So there are options to change away from what seems like a very commonly built slate right now. By 5:30, this will probably be completely different. Mamba says, for the record, the Mamba Cola of the day is at 100% with Sabonis and Porzingis on the last slate. 100%. Sabonis going to be playing pissed off after getting screwed out of the All-Star game. Big snub. Can we get that Mamba Cola of the day sponsorship pending? Yeah, Doug, I think that's, I think that's accurate. Because they're of the nature of some of just these guys who will come up at mediocre to lousy per minute marks, or a lot of the other guys are going to have a ton of just public weight and a little bit of lack of leverage on them. So yeah, there's some uncomfortability to it, but there's also again this giant crop of 30% plus owned guys that the names in that group: Vassell, Oubre, Oubre a little bit less, but Vassell, Lillard, Westbrook, Kobe White, Jaylen Brown, Not a bad collection of fantasy contributors. So a little bit yes, a little bit no. But I do expect that things are going to change as we get toward lock. Nick Smith on FanDuel, coming up a little bit. 4.81. He's shooting guard only. He's only 45 over there. That's a great example of what Doug was just talking about as far as just low-end players, low-faith players. In 27 minutes the other night, he put up 8 FanDuel points. 8. That's not good. He's a .71 per minute player, .67 last year. But what you do kind of cling to when you're making this decision to play Nick Smith is the fact that there is a little bit of usage there. At least you're not getting a low-end contributor who also comes with 14.2% usage like Eric Gordon. 13% like AJ Green. At least there's the idea that a couple shots might be taken. Now, whether they fall or not is where the rubber meets the road on a guy like that. Very, very capable of letting us down. I would rather take a larger negative position, I think, on Nick Smith than have him to that degree. What my hope would be here is that we just start out pacing him with some other values showing up and some shares going to some of these guys. Like, I think I'd rather have shares there of $4,500 Grady Dick, even though I've got him projected for 5 fewer minutes. It's close. I'm not saying that's like the best guy to swap to by any means, but like, there's an argument to be made there. $4,300 Gary Trent is definitely an argument to be made there. I don't love that. Again, I would look to probably shave that down some. Drew, 6% below the field. Meh. He's fine. Quickly, if he plays, did come up on FanDuel. He's only 62 over there. 1.0 per minute for the season this year in his limited action. He's only played 9 games, 28 minutes a night. I gave him those 28 minutes. I don't know that he would get it. I think the range could be anywhere like 24 to 28. That's the high side at 28. What did I give him on rate? This is 4 hours ago at this point. He's above his season-long production and slightly above the production from last year, but that's justified by the game environment. So it's the model just picking it up. Technically, I actually took him down by 2 fantasy points from where the model would have put him at. I don't love, again, this is another one. I don't really, really love that. I could see having some, but 22 in what would be his first game back feels a little aggressive, even though it's a good price. Especially when part of it is getting floated by the game environment, where that becomes exponentially worse with every minute projected that he doesn't end up playing. Let's say it is 20, even 25, not 28 as a hard limit today. The fact that we're accounting for game environment creating more opportunity, more points within those minutes, it becomes a bigger problem as those minutes get shaved down. So I think I would want less exposure to that risk, I think. We also just might not have him. I think that's it on the FanDuel side. Those were the outliers. Not a single one of those last couple guys mattered at all on DK. I will say, outlier from the upper end, $8,800 Kyrie. Only 1 share across 150 lineups on DraftKings. Handful of shares on FanDuel. Were below the field, but gently so on both sites. It doesn't look like he's popular on either site. A few more shares is fine in either situation, but he's also not super appealing as compared to the higher end players who were priced a little bit either more effectively or a little bit higher. 113 on DraftKings, 110 this year on FanDuel. Not exactly dynamite Kyrie performance. He's a 1.22 per minute player last year. Misic at 53. Still coming up at 15%. Level with the field on FanDuel. I think I would want a little bit less. I don't love how that 53 bounces off that 30 minutes for a 0.69 per minute guy who is, I'm going to say a number of times already, kind of burnt this. It's injecting minor amount of bias in there, but I think it's right at the right point where this is me arguing for bias. Yeah, I don't know. I think there's a lot of better options than Micic. 53 point guard, shooting guard on DraftKings, you don't have to worry about it. Would you rather have that 4.74 or for 100 more, Stephon Castle at a 4.84 value, a little bit better projection? That's close. Not my favorite option on the board, but easily playable. There is definitely opportunity there like there has been the last few games. Let's get to forwards, centers. I'll put them both on the board. You can pick up a little time. So here's a lot of our exposure. And definitely just tons of our value. I mean, look at, as compared to that guards board, look how many of these guys are 5.5 plus or, in that territory. So this is where all the value is among the forwards and the centers. Same thing on FanDuel. You can see all the dark green, all the numbers above 5 in there. Differently shaped somewhat, though. Vassell we've talked about. Aaron Gordon we talked about at the top of the show, but again, just absolutely fantastic for how he's priced. Played 30 and a half minutes in his return to the starting lineup the other day. He only put up 21.7 fantasy points. That's not good. But under normal circumstances, you give him those 30 minutes, you're going to get maybe not quite 30 fantasy points, but 29 and change. You're going to get very close to a point per minute with a nice little ceiling for those prices, particularly on DK at 44. That's just way too low. They are way, way off the mark. 53 on FanDuel looks great. So big yes to all the Aaron Gordon you can carry. Paul Reed, again, with a 17-minute projection, is looking relevant at the single center FanDuel spot. 5.78 value score over there. He's played this season at 1.29 per minute in his 10 minutes a night over 26 games. Not exactly a gigantic sample, but don't really need one here. And we've seen Paul Reed over the last few years. We know that he can produce at decent numbers, 1.09 per minute in his action last year. For the flat min 3,000 on DraftKings center, he's just a free square to plug into center or util. 41%, that's gently above the field. I think you can absolutely take more, 6.59 value. The numbers are there. You really only need those 17 minutes. And honestly, even if it's 15, 14, probably fine. He's just a dead min price guy. He's a step stool. You put him down in the util spot, he's a step stool for everybody else to get into your lineup. That's all that needs to be. RJ coming up a little bit more than I would have maybe anticipated. 26% on FanDuel, ahead of the field at just a 4.8 value score. Again, that's probably a product of the small forward positioning. 41% on DraftKings, 7,300 over there. It's a much better price. Puts him above our value threshold on the DK slate. We're not insignificantly below on the FanDuel slate and still getting there. It just looks like a much better option on DK at 73. That said, potentially a minor haircut if everybody's active and healthy and IQ's there and everything in terms of 1.20, 1.15 that he's put up so far this season, mostly without IQ there. So 1.02 last year in 25.7% usage, seeing a little bit more usage upside this season. And RJ's a good contributor. So he could get there anyway, even if everybody's healthy. But that would take him down a little bit in my esteem. But that's also how it's projected right now. So there's a difference between projecting it and the reality of the situation in the end. The way it's projected right now, he is looking pretty good. It's definitely one of the more appealing game environments of the slate. Again, two pretty weak teams playing at a high pace with a high total. There's a lot to like in that. Jalen Duren, monster on FanDuel. Got him at 30 minutes. He played 31-3 the other day. Also impacted, obviously, by the absence of the backup. So there should be security of minutes with upside potentially for a little bit more And it's got him at a 5.57 value score. He's a 1.14 player this year, 1.14 last year on more usage. So technically he's maintained pretty nicely, even with a dip in opportunity. .6% assist rate. I hadn't actually caught that before. Decent facilitator for a big man. 19.4% rebounding, 70.1% true shooting. There's nothing not to like. The minutes definitely can fluctuate, but I think today is one of our more solid opportunities to get him at upside minutes. We talked about Jalen, but there's Tatum right next to him. 96 on FanDuel, 47% of our lineups with money to spend. I will happily carry as much Jason Tatum as I can in this situation against New Orleans with money to spend on FanDuel. On DraftKings, 9,500 both forward spots. We get them 25% of the time, essentially level with the field. Either one of these guys, I think you can take more of. It's not necessarily a situation where I would say, all right, take more of this one at the expense of that one, but you can play that game a little bit. But they both look just very, very appealing. 5.36 and a 5.34 value score. Not bad at all. Technically, Tatum's FanDuel value mark is the best among the four value marks, though. 5.16 is above the threshold. Technically, the other three spots are not. 4.85, 5.34, and 5.36. But on this slate especially, these two play quite well. And these guys both play up at the upper echelon of ceiling score potential. Let's grab one of those at a time. Let's see. Jones. Is he a forward or a guard on DK? Thought he had. Oh, there he is. Looked right past him 3 times. 11% DraftKings for 43. Power forward. And small forward, power forward on FanDuel, 23%. Better piece on the FanDuel slate. He trends more toward that low usage, low production kind of guy. He's slightly better, obviously, than your 0.6 type guys that do that. As you point out, it is a cake matchup going up against Charlotte. I don't really see him in much more of an is who he is kind of a situation in a good game environment, though. You're very likely to just get that kind of a night, 32.5 minutes, 22.9 FanDuel points, perfectly fine NBA performance, not a standout DFS kind of a performance. It's right in line with what I've got him projected for. So I do think there's, again, there's an argument to be made that at worst he's a swappable part for 4,300. That's what's getting him into 11% of lineups. At 47 on FanDuel, he's getting into more, possibly driving through, again, that small forward eligibility. Although the more guys I pile into that, the less room there is for that to be true. But definitely the 2 forward spots are pulling some of those guys in at lower value scores. But I think he's more rotational piece, moving part, than he is priority. Jalen Smith got a call out. He didn't really come up. 16-minute projected. You think he's going more than that? At 16, I don't like him. If we get him in the low 20s, for every additional minute he plays, he's going to look significantly better. He's a 1.22 per minute player on FanDuel, 1.23 on DraftKings. Last year, 1.17. So, sure, we can find him 7 more minutes. $23 in that one, 14, 14, 18, 14, going back to 4 before that. And that was just with Levine out. What was the actual situation there? I didn't look this game up specifically. It wasn't top of my brain to see about finding him more minutes, but give it a look. Chicago. There they are. Was this game out of hand? They were losing by 20. They lost by 22 to Boston in that last game. And he played the entire fourth quarter. So, yeah, I think that's where those minutes came from. So, yes to what you guys I think we're getting at if you had those additional minutes in your pocket, or if you're angling for like this game's going to go that way and he'll find 7 minutes. But you're just kind of gambling at that point, right? That's not how we've got it looking. That's not really what he's been doing for the bulk of the season. I'm going to lose it till I win the Millie says Vooch and Smith or Reed and Dame. I assume that's on DK. I think it's pretty strongly Reed and Dame. Right, again, Reed's just there to be a building block, right? So it's really a question of Dame and what else, right? That ought to look like Dame and Giannis or Dame and Tatum and something, right? It's not necessarily just those guys, but I think it would be that just because that was the lineup that buys you that value square. Guys, correct me if I'm missing something on Jalen Smith. I don't think those minutes are going to be there, but if you guys see it differently, let me know. If I'm missing something, please always feel free to correct me. This is a dialogue. The more this is a dialogue, the better the show is for everybody. Oh, good. Per the Weather Channel, a building-size asteroid could strike the Earth in 2032. Is there any way to speed it up? Brown, Tatum we talked about. Then we get to Wemby and Giannis. Not a bad run of players right here. And then one of these things, two of these things, not quite like the others. But Wemby looks great to good to playable. Giannis looks terrific. They're both astounding per minute guys. 165, 166 on FanDuel, 161, 167 on DraftKings. Giannis pulls away slightly in this year's production on DraftKings. They're essentially even on FanDuel. Last year, Wemby was the better producer on both sites. But you're getting outrageous rates in a head-to-head matchup there. I have no issues with either side of that one. I think they're both super appealing. I think you can carry more of either player. We're level with the field on both guys on FanDuel with more Giannis in our pocket for the higher price. Essentially double. And then on DraftKings, we're lighter. We're essentially the same exposure to both players, but lighter against the field on Giannis, which is interesting. I do think there's some back and forth between those two guys, especially here on the FanDuel side. If you're getting Wemby essentially level with the field at 18 and Giannis essentially level with the field at 36, you can make a minor sacrifice against the field on Giannis shares for 100 less, get some more Wemby, build a plus position on Wemby while it takes Giannis to like a slightly negative position there. But that might be an interesting just tournament approach in a portfolio of lineups. I don't think it would be a mistake. It would just be an angle of attack on this slate that I think is at worst viable. The difference in their projections right now is the 2 minutes additional that Giannis is projected to play. So that's not a bad at least back and forth to explore, and especially if that 100 can buy you your way from one guy to a much better producer. That's interesting. It's a little bit different on DK where you've got a $500 gap in price. Doesn't work quite as well. Diabate for 46. We've been here before. 42 on FanDuel. 20% exposed on the 42 on DraftKings rather. 20% exposed on the DK slate. Below the field. Still 1 in 5. Both sites really still 1 in 5. He's played at 0.90 this year. Everything is a relatively light sample. 1.24 last year obviously could be made more appealing, but in general, I think this guy is the 0.90 type that we've seen. 37 games of 18 minutes a night. It's not a great sample, but it's also not nothing. If you're talking about usage, there are Dude does not take shots. Does have a nice 17.4% rebounding rate, though. He is a true big in this game. 28 minutes. You could do worse at those spots, especially for the 42 on DraftKings. He would probably be, I'll say, like level with the field at 40-ish% if we didn't have a mixer like that at value and we didn't have some of those AG shares probably going through center. I think he's getting squeezed a little bit by some of the weight that's going up there, too. At worst, Diabate is super playable here. I don't want to give the impression that he's not. He is a decent enough per minute guy. He's very cheap. The minutes should be secure to having additional upside a little bit. So, perfectly fine. Ricky Council, I tried. I really did. I only gave him 23 minutes. I wasn't going to the 29 that he played and put up 17 points the other day. There is the back and forth with him and Edwards. I didn't think he would come up like this at 23 minutes for 47. He came up 19% of the time at shooting guard on FanDuel. Feels very high. 18% small forward, power forward on DraftKings for 42. I get this a little bit more. That's functional. 5.29 value for 4,200. That's okay. At 47 on FanDuel, that is an odd result. I don't love that. I want to take a look at that. Show me just the shooting guard eligible players. What do we got? Yeah, I feel like that shouldn't be coming up that much. It's a mixer, sure, at 469, but give me any of these guys, obviously. Give me Beasley over him. Give me Castle over him. Czar Thompson with the same minutes projection comes up about the same. He's 300 more. That's an argument to be made. Thompson against Council there. For 300 more, same projection as far as minutes go. Essentially the same value. I could see that as a back and forth, but a lot of these guys look better. I'm surprised both of them are coming up as much as they are on FanDuel. Thompson and Council. Anyway. Doug says, for me, it's just how the slate feels. I don't feel strongly about any of the value plays getting 10, 15 more minutes more than Jalen Smith. Smith is disregarding the minutes and understanding he can get 30 fantasy points. A couple cheap 30 fantasy point plays probably wins the slate. Yeah, and that's kind of the lane, as I was talking about. I was doing it more through the expectation of minutes. But yeah, if you're getting to a totally unowned guy who does have that kind of per minute, all you need to fill in the rest of that equation is him playing those minutes. So I don't disagree with it from that angle. But, it's difficult to, I don't want to tell people to go run off and play it because it's not the way it's projected and it's not the way it's necessarily coming through. Power adds 1.3 per minute player, like we were saying, is very, very good per minute guy. Vooch is smaller than Pirtle, so I'll take a flyer on foul trouble. Okay. I can buy that. If we're just looking for reasons to say maybe he plays more minutes. Again, it's not something I would go in and try and project. But if you're building 3 lineups and you want to take one of them that route, no problem with it. And that's probably, honestly, at least as viable as what I was saying earlier in the show about, all right, if you want to get away from having value bigs and spending at guard, you can do this. By the same token, taking a different value big that's kind of off the board is a radical approach to doing that same thing. Patty Williams came up a few times earlier. Again, just looking solid. 32% on FanDuel, 17% on DraftKings. We're below the field at the $4,200 DraftKings mark. 5.50 on the nose, though, as far as value goes. I think you could take more Patty Williams. I wouldn't mind leveling him up to the field. 20-25% is fine. on the DraftKings slate. On FanDuel, 5+ value score definitely looks appealing at 4,600. Power forward only, but functional piece at worst. 32% of our lineups there definitely like the upside. That said, 0.76 per minute, 16% usage. We know how that looks sometimes when it goes through the grinder. But we've gotten some solid production recently. It is a soft game environment overall, so I do expect production from essentially everyone, or at least, if we've got 10 guys that might be on the board from that game, I expect production from 4 of them and 6 of them to completely fail us. But Patty's easily on the list that you can expect some production. 30 minutes the other day, put up nearly a point per minute, has that reasonable upside. Keldon, I mentioned earlier, we're getting him 35%. Some of these, man, this is what you're talking about when you talk about how uncomfortable this slate is, Doug. To me, it's these guys. Guys like Keldon that I never really want to get to. Mediocre minutes that are very insecure. Is an okay but not good producer. I guess the price has come down to somewhat reasonable levels now, 4,000, 4,200 across sites. But if the field's at 35% on Keldon Johnson, I do not want to be holding hands with that. 4.7 value? No thanks. If the field was at 35% and he was a 5 value, then we'd be talking differently about it. I can get away from this play pretty easily, and I think I would. Not completely, but if I'm taking 10 points off of that and still having Keldon Johnson in 1 in 4 lineups, I'll take that position on that player basically every time. I think the DraftKings one looks a lot better. 12% below the field, that's fine. And he's a better value on DraftKings. 4,000 plays him up to a 5.14 DraftKings value. It's a little bit better. Jones we talked about, but again, at worst, a mix and match piece, rotational guy, better value on FanDuel than on DraftKings right now. JRE, no thank you, but we did get him 10% of the time. Just another guy who's a free square. So maybe he rotated in for some of those Paul Reed shares a few times. I got him at 18. There is no Daniel Theis tonight, et cetera, et cetera. 0.85 per minute. I think you just got to go the Paul Reed direction if you're deciding between those two. I mean, just the gulf of fantasy points per minute between those two guys kind of explains it all. 1.17 to 0.85. If you're going by last year, 0.79 for JRE versus 1.09 for Paul Reed. And it's not like they play, dissimilar backup type minutes most of the time. He's a mediocre substitution, I think, on the DK slate. Maybe you can get away with it. Vooch is a mixer. Outside of the speculating on, potentially some foul trouble. 8,000 on DraftKings, not a bad price for a 1.28 per minute player. He's in 9% of our DraftKings lineups. It's a little bit below the field. I wouldn't begrudge anybody an additional, 4 or 5% and, have 12% in level with the field on Vooch. You can get there. 32 minutes, that's right on his season-long average. I don't really see the need to have him play more than that, but again, he did just rest the entire fourth quarter in that last game. They were getting lit up at the time. So not inconceivable that we could see him play 34 or 35, especially if it's close. KP, mix and match kind of guy at worst. The 6-year anniversary of his trade away from the New York Knicks. The day that things turned around for the Knicks. Or the low point, depending on how you want to look at it. KP's fine at worst. Again, if you're going to that game, I think it's all just Celtics pieces, but I like the other two big Celtics a lot better than KP here. Pirtle, didn't get him on FanDuel. We're below the field there, obviously. Fairly significantly below the field at 7% on DraftKings, though. He's only 66 on the DK slate. He was 73 on FanDuel, so that makes sense that we weren't getting him there. I think this is the range you would want him in, 5 to 10% and below the field. He's a reasonable enough contributor that you can take some shares, but I wouldn't press my luck and try and get him to 15, 20, wherever the field might be. For one, you're just getting 31.2 minutes on average with a little bit of downside there. I've got him at 30 for tonight. Capable as far as the per minute scoring, 35.6 in just 26.6 minutes the other day. But you do get downside in that run sometimes. Middleton, MPJ, mix and match guys across both sites. Sohan, same thing. Justin Edwards at 26 minutes. We got a few shares of him on both sites, 4,000. I like him even less than I like Ricky Council. Azar Thompson, again, 17% on that FanDuel slate, 5,000. That is that back and forth that we were talking about a minute ago. At 45 on DK, we really didn't get him that much, 2% below the field. Quentin Grimes, mix and match guy. Peyton Watson. Amir Coffey, still getting minutes, still cheap, but really not much there. 0.64 per minute on DK, 0.62 per minute on FanDuel, essentially the epitome of that low-end, low-usage, low-production guy. He's just cheap. He just has a price tag next to minutes allocation, and that's essentially all it is. But we got him a few times. In 150 lineups, you can roll him out there a handful of times. If you're building one lineup, Amir Coffey probably shouldn't be in it. Mike, Pritchard came up before. He was a solid mixer. I forget who I compared him to. There was somebody he compared very well with. Yeah, at 51, we got him 3% here. That was the comparison I was making. We got 12% of Malik Beasley at shooting guard for the same price. If you reverse those, I would have absolutely no problem with it, and it would probably build a plus position or at least put you with the field on Pritchard. And it takes you to just a more significant minus position on Beasley. And between the two, again, it's close enough to a tie for my money. You're getting 0.97 out of Pritchard. I've got him at 28 minutes, so it's the same minutes projection. And you're only getting 0.93 technically per minute out of Beasley. There's probably a slightly higher ceiling on Beasley if you get that damn Beasley went off tonight kind of a day. But those have been fairly few and far between. And he's hitting, I will say, 40.9% of his threes, though. That's appealing. So that's what you need to capture, really, in that if you get that upside Malik Beasley day, is the day where, these 3 and change threes have gone down in the first quarter, and he's got that little heat check going. That's the day you want to have Malik Beasley. More often than not, I think I would rather have Peyton Pritchard, so I'm fine with reversing that position. Oops, not 97 on Tyrese, this one. Or maybe you just even it out, level both guys in the 6-7% range. But I think he's playable. Mama says Patty Will is a better play than Smith. Toronto doesn't defend catch and shoot players well. I think Patty Will is just a better DFS play overall than regardless of the added analysis. But I appreciate the added analysis there, buddy. But yeah, I think Patty Will is the much clearer, secure DFS play. Not secure in guaranteed results, but secure this side of lock what it looks like, Yeah, and that's how we were breaking it down, Mamba. I'm not sure if you were here while I was talking about it, but yeah, if you were finding him those additional 7 minutes that he played in the blowout the other day, then we got something to talk about. I don't want to play Zubac, but I don't see how the Clips don't beat the brakes off of Charlotte early, but the spread did drop a point, so Vegas knows something we don't. I don't know. I wouldn't worry about that, any real line movement in that one. It's just kind of an unappealing overall game. At 208.5 point total, that is 21 points lower than every other game on the slate. Or 20.5 technically. The next lowest game is 229. That's not insignificant. So, yeah, the Clips going to go out and handle their business against one of the worst teams in basketball? Absolutely. I would expect. I don't know that necessarily creates an overly appealing situation to be getting to that many Clippers. I think Diabate is the appealing piece in that game. And even he, again, we were coming up light on him as compared to the field anyway. Just make sure we didn't leave anything on the table among the forwards and the centers there. I know we've been talking for a while. hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button. Notifications, I don't care. You turn them on, turn them off. Doesn't bother me either way. But subscribe if you get a chance. Trying to get this thing over 1,000 subscribers so we can do some more interesting things. Check out rotoscouts.com. Access to NBA, NHL, every main slate, and NFL for the Super Bowl, plus MLB right around the corner, with hopefully some season-long surprises sprinkled on top. Under $1 a day for access to all of it if you're new here. Give it a look. Also, and that's not for if you're new here. I mean, if you're new here, I'm informing you of that. But that is the case all the time. No surprise fees. It doesn't change next week or next month. That's what you're buying in at. I'm going to drop a link to our Discord in the chat there as well. Discord's always free. Hop in, join the community. Even if you don't subscribe at the site, join us. Come hang out. Some good folks in there sharing info, joking back and forth. Doug wants to talk about Modest Buzelis. Don't remember saying his name as we've been going through this. Boozy. There he is. I got him at 18. He came up 1% on DK. 38 hundo. He played 21 in that last game. That was also in that blowout. He played the last 6 minutes of the game to get there. Prior to that was essentially tracking for, I think, typical exposure. Yeah, 0.88 per minute, 16.9% usage under normal circumstances. I don't love it. He's very cheap, so if you piled on a little bit of additional opportunity or a little bit of additional time, it would start to look better and better, and we did get him. That's the thing that's making me hesitate a little bit, that we did actually get him because it's that kind of a slate like what we've been talking about, where we're getting some exposure to these just low-end guys just as spot fillers and, you know, mixing into some lineups here and there. And it's not completely preposterous to think that he could have an okay day for the money in 20 minutes, 21. You know, give me that with a little bit better output. But even that, I don't know that he's getting you there. I don't have like a let's see. I think we're going to need him to be like a 24 and change kind of a producer to just barely squeak by getting you there. I don't know that we're getting that. You know, that starts to compound the difficulty of getting that. I would want about 24, I think, on this slate for that money. I got to find that old file. Start running those again. Can I make an argument for giving him anything more? Doug's a sharp guy, so when Doug asks about a player, I like to look into it. It does look like he's picking up slightly more public ownership. I think it even went up since this sim ran. Yeah, I think at best we're talking about oh, wow, that has gone up significantly now. Hold on. Just real quick, Dante Exum active, limited to 15 minutes. Nick Batum out. Saturday. Everything else is Saturday. Jamal Shed now doubtful. We talked about that earlier in the show. Why did this go up so significantly? Oh, weird. Came back down. I wonder what created that. Very strange. I know you guys can't see what I'm looking at. I'm looking at the site where I get the ownership numbers from. And before I reloaded it, he had gone up pretty significantly, and then I reloaded it, and now he's back down higher than he had been, but lower than he was in that weird intermittent update or in-between update. Unless we're piling more minutes on there, and we do have a questionable THT. So as far as like, just voiding, what do I have him getting 4 minutes? Could there be a couple additional there? Maybe. Couple lineups on FanDuel. Yeah, and Doug, I think the way he's projected right now, he is coming up in a couple lineups on FanDuel and on DraftKings. So I think that's fine. Just as like a priority kind of option. I don't think we're gonna look at him in any way. Power says, yeah, Doug, I got railroaded into Andre Jackson too. Both FanDuel and DK lock their positionality to drive lineups in a certain way. That tells me that it's likely that if there's no salary left over, no first. That's an interesting thought. Just leaving a little bit of dough on the table to differentiate. It always is an easy path into just having a completely different lineup, but on a lot of slates, you're leaving significant enough value on the board. I haven't really looked at it through that kind of a lens, but just on what we've talked about during the show, I think that actually probably tracks. With like kind of tight value, a few very specific commonly owned plays among the bigs, but some other guys like the ones, the low end guys that we've talked about at low prices where there's at least some pivots for those value shares. So I think grabbing a different one of those that's like 200 less at zeroed out ownership and making a different equally high end star decision at a different position that takes your lineup down a different version of that path. And then everything else, just commonly built with the top plays of the day is not a terrible approach if it, creates that bubble. That mine, guys, hour 20 in. I think we've gone through all the relevant centers and big men here. We do have Josh Green coming up a little bit. He's small forward only on DraftKings where he did not come up at all. 4,200 on FanDuel, though. We got a little bit of Josh Green. Again, I just don't love that game. I'll take some value plays there, but at 14, if the field's going to be at 14, 15%, I would very much rather be at, say 5% on a guy like Josh Green. Another guy, 0.58 per minute, 11.1% usage last year on 12.9, not all that much better. It's just a low-end spot. Yes, there's different opportunities. It's differently shaped, but it's projected that way, and that's still where we're getting. So give me less of Josh Green than that and less than the field. Nick Smith, I talked about being essentially that exact same take. Give me less of the 27%. DraftKings, you don't have to worry about either of those guys. This is like the entire Charlotte side here. There's Bridges, 2%. Out of the three Charlotte players, the one I would want most is probably just Miles Bridges just on general quality. But obviously you're talking about a very different price fit. And that's to illustrate what I was just talking about with making some of those differentiated decisions on a slate like this. That's not necessarily the kind of guy that you want to move into. He's a good enough per minute performer, but you get it. You're talking about, again, the game that's offset from all the others by 20 points in Vegas. He's only projected for 33 minutes. He only plays just under 32 on average. He can spike big days. 32 minutes the other day, he put up a 50 on the FanDuel scale, and he is over a 1.1 per minute player. But he's priced like it. He's priced kind of appropriately for at least who he is and a bit of additional opportunity around him. Maybe not the full version of it, but there are so many guys on this slate that just beat him out in those value senses that he's not an appropriate type guy to a few lineups. It's fine, right? Any given lineup, fine. But as far as a strategy across a portfolio of lineups, like he doesn't compare all that favorably with even $8,000 RJ Barrett. Similar pricing and positioning, similar overall production. We got a significantly larger share of RJ. Doug says, I'm not getting the Bridges today, which is scaring me. And say, I think it's justified with where we're coming down on those. Again, 4.62 is a nothing value mark. 4.46 on DraftKings. We're really not there. No positional flex on DraftKings. He's 400 more on the DK slate than he is on FanDuel. I think that 85 is just right on the nose for that 115 to 1-2 or whatever it is that he would produce. Exum debut, 15-minute cap on Exum. I think I gave him 16. Pretty sure. I wasn't expecting him to be at all relevant. I only actually gave him 12. I think that's about everything on the... What's up, Zevon? I think I skipped over Zevon earlier. Zevon said hello. Zevon711. Appreciate everybody who's been here throughout. I feel like we bounced around a little bit on this one, but got through a lot. Nobody really standing out for outliers to discuss the rest of the way. I think this time probably best used just running some updates, getting everything in place on the site. So one last time, guys, check out rotoscouts.com. Also give our guys over at acemine.io some love. It's where the sims run. Great sim tools, great optimizer tools, fantastic pricing as compared to everybody else in the industry doing that. Promo code ROTOSCOUTS, all in caps, gets you 20% off your first month over there. So show those guys some love as well. And I'm going to get the football projections up for the Super Bowl over this weekend, I think. Typical coverage, NBA, NHL over the weekend, and then back live shows presumably on Monday, barring any day getting away from me type situations like we have from time to time. But at worst, projections, full blow, full go, full blow. I think it's time to end the show. What do you think? Good luck out there tonight, you guys. Somebody go win something. Share it when you do. And we'll be back on Monday. Later.